Hey guys, I'm always eager to try 3D printer filament from different manufacturers, and today PolyMakr have sent a few variations of their product for me to review. Let's check it out. The two boxes of filament on the left hand side here are the PolyMakr PLA filament. They've sent me the colours in orange and white. These rolls are 1.75mm diameter filament. The weight of these rolls is 750 grams each. I'm really excited about the PolyMakr PLA filament. This stuff is quoted to have 9 times the impact strength of PLA, standard PLA, and up to 20% greater impact strength than ABS filament. Now this is really good to be able to print with all the benefits of a PLA plastic, the ease of printing, but with the impact strength of an ABS type filament. That is a great feature to have, and people that struggle to print with ABS or that don't have heated print beds but want the impact strength of an ABS type plastic, this PolyMakr PLA is probably for you. And on this side, this top box is called Poly Plus PLA. They've sent the colour blue. This filament is also 1.75mm in diameter and also comes in 750 gram rolls. The Poly Plus PLA is probably closer to the standard PLA type plastic that we're all used to printing with. However, the Poly Plus PLA is said to incorporate a jam-free technology. So we'll go in and see exactly what they mean by jam-free technology in a moment. The box underneath, however, is not a PLA filament at all. This stuff is called Polywood 3D printing filament. The colour of this roll is, as you guessed it, wood. The weight of this is only 600 grams, and we'll have a look at why the weight of this roll is 600 grams. It's physically the same size as the other rolls. And also, even though it's called polywood, there is no wood within this 3D printing plastic at all. They call it polywood because it has a unique foaming technology which apparently delivers a material or a structure which mimics a wood type material. So this stuff is I guess quite unique. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what a printed part looks like with printing with this polywood. Opening the boxes of the PolyMakr PLA filament, we are greeted with a product information pamphlet. This is where it tells us about the strength of the PolyMakr. So here it says the impact strength of up to 9 times that of regular PLA and 20% better than ABS plastic, which is really good. And they also mention that the good mechanical strength of PolyMakr is achieved with no compromise in printing quality, which is also very important. Turning over the leaflet, we have the basic specifications of this plastic. So it tells us things like the recommended printing temperature range, the recommended printing speed, and also the recommended heat bed temperature if you have one equipped. That is optional. And also it gives us the average filament diameter. So this is the filament diameter tolerance of this plastic. So it mentions here 1.75mm or 3mm filament is available. I have the 1.75, and the typical diameter deviation is as little as 0.02 of a millimeter. That is a really tight tolerance, and that level of tolerance is exactly what you need to produce quality, good-looking prints. So this is good stuff to use. And also we have down here instructions, but meh, who reads instructions? The filament comes in these vacuum-sealed reusable bags. Now, I've already been printing with this filament, so they're no longer vacuum-sealed. However, I'll put up some footage before I crack this open just to show you how they were presented. But these bags are really good. Being able to, put your roll of plastic back in the bag, zip it up. There's bags of desiccant inside here as well. To keep moisture away from your filament will allow you to store this plastic for a very long time. And to be honest, who only has just one roll of plastic? You've always got a few rolls lying around, so being able to store them back into the bag that it came with zip it up. There's a bag of desiccant inside. Perfect. Okay, so looking at the filament, this is the orange PolyMakr PLA. This is a very vibrant orange. The actual texture of this plastic is very, very smooth. And being PolyMakr PLA, I'm assuming it's going to have similar properties to an ABS type plastic. So that is, it's going to be a little bit softer than PLA, and it's also not going to be as brittle as PLA. And one test I can show you now is the bend test of the filament itself. So I'll just grasp the filament like this, and I'll bend it back, and it shouldn't snap. It should just strain. So let's do that now. Yeah, so I've bent that at quite a sharp angle, and you can clearly see the discoloration in the filament. So it has strained, but it has not broken. And doing the same test with the white PolyMakr, and this is a beautiful white. It's almost like a soft white, I guess. It's quite good actually. So same thing. This actual filament, once again, very smooth texture. I'll do that same bend test again, so I'll grip it there and bend it back. And yeah, same thing, it hasn't snapped, it simply strains the plastic. So let me grab some of the Australian-made PLA that I use and do that same bend test. So here's the spool of the Australian-made PLA plastic that I've been using up until this point. So I'll do that exact same test. I'll grab the filament and give it a bend. Let's see what happens. Yeah, pretty much straight away. I wasn't even able to bend, 3/4 of the way around, and it simply snapped. So this is where a normal PLA is quite stiff but brittle, where an ABS is a little softer but is able to handle more impact. So to do that test again, this is another roll of Australian-made filament, but this blue stuff is ABS plastic. So let's do that same bend test again. So I'll grasp it there and give it a bend, and there we go. It's able to bend back onto itself. Once again, you can see the discoloration, but it hasn't broken. So that's really good, a really good feature to have in a PLA plastic. And just one thing I'd like to point out about PolyMakr PLA is even though it incorporates the same, if not better, impact strength resistance over ABS plastic, it is still a PLA, and as such it still maintains the glass transition temperature of standard PLA plastics. Inside the box of the Poly Plus PLA, once again we are greeted with the product information leaflet. This is where it tells us about the jam-free technology that this Poly Plus PLA incorporates. And I'll read this verbatim. They mention the patented jam-free technology dramatically improves the heat stability of the PLA filament, so while printing it will never soften in the cold end and can melt rapidly once entering the heat zone. This leads to extremely smooth extrusion and no more nozzle jams. So that's interesting. They're saying that their PLA filament doesn't soften in the cold end but will rapidly melt when it reaches the hot end. And that's one of the causes of nozzle jams, which is quite interesting because I always thought whenever I get a nozzle jam, I just assume that a speck of dust or something has attached itself to the filament and that's made its way, through the PTFE tube and down into the hot end and causes a blockage. But what PolyMakr is saying is the actual filament can soften in the cold end, leading to a nozzle jam as well. So that's actually quite interesting. So that's something that I guess I'll have to test throughout the life of this roll. The Poly Plus PLA also comes housed in a vacuum-sealed Ziploc reusable storage bag with a bag of desiccant to absorb moisture. The colour blue PLA that I have here is a really rich, deep colour. I really like this colour blue actually. It's a much better blue than the Australian-made blue ABS that I've been using. The actual filament itself is different to the PolyMakr. The PolyMakr was quite smooth. The Poly Plus PLA, however, has a very fine texture to it. I can feel some very fine roughness, so that's going to make printing with a Bowden setup very simple. And lastly, we have Polywood, and just like the rest of the filaments, we're greeted with a product information leaflet. And here is where it describes all the interesting properties of this polywood filament. It mentions that there is no real wood in polywood. However, they've developed a unique foaming technology to deliver a material that mimics wood structurally. So that's quite interesting, a foaming technology. I wonder if this material expands when it's being printed and creating like a wood structure as it's foaming. They also mention the light weight of this material. It is 35 to 40% lighter than regular PLA. So that goes some way into understanding why the net weight of this roll is only 600 grams rather than the other PLA filament being 750. I assume that there is just as much, if not more, filament on this roll lengthwise as opposed to weight. Once again, this filament comes in a vacuum-sealed Ziploc reusable storage bag with a bag of desiccant. And yeah, this is quite different filament. The colour, it certainly looks like a standard woody type brown colour. And the texture is something that I haven't really seen before. It has a random roughness to it. It does resemble like a twig, I guess, or something. It really does look like wood. So well done to PolyMakr for creating a synthetic wood looking material. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the results with this material. So let's start with this one. We'll start by loading the polywood into the Bowden extruder. I have the hot end preheated to 220 degrees Celsius, so I can insert the polywood into the E3D hot end. There we go, I can see filament being extruded, push down the PTFE tube, and finally reattach the Bowden idler. And extrude some filament. This polywood material seems quite oozy. I wonder if that has something to do with the foaming action that this filament has. And here we have the Marvin Keychain, which is available on Thingiverse. I'll place the link below now. The polywood material printed this without an issue. I printed this at 0.1mm layer height. There are 4 perimeters. It is hollow, so there's no infill. And I printed this quite slowly at 20mm a second because it is quite a small piece. And I was using the cooling fans attached to the hot end with this. And it printed successfully with this polywood material. Now the first thing you'll notice is the actual texture or the look of the part. It does kind of look like it has a wood grainy type look and feel to it. It does feel quite rough. I feel like getting some sandpaper out and trying to, sand this flush and then polishing it. But this is really nice. And even at 0.1mm layer height, it had no issue printing all of these features that this Marvin Keychain has. One thing I did notice was whenever it had to do a retract and then move to another section of the print, it did like to ooze quite a bit. So that's something to keep in mind with this material. But besides that, this is really easy to print with. And here we have the customizable Chalice Slave. Also available on Thingiverse, I wanted to print something which would resemble a wooden object in real life, and well, what better than a block of wood that could be turned down on a lathe. So this part was printed with 4 perimeters. It was printed hollow and with no top. The part stuck down on the blue painter's tape without an issue, and then was able to be peeled off once the print had finished. No heat was applied to the heat bed, so it was printed at room temperature, and exactly the same with the Marvin piece, printed at room temperature. This was printed at 0.2mm layer height, so a coarser layer height than with the Marvin. However, because of the rough finish that this polywood produces, it's actually quite difficult to see the individual layers, even at 0.2. So that's quite a benefit with printing with this material, and it is a really nice looking piece. It has a uniform finish to it, and once again, it is very light, and also it's quite strong. I'd say this is probably just as strong as your standard PLA type material, so yeah, very nice. And here we have the MakerBot Gnome. This MakerBot Gnome was scaled down to 50%, printed once again at 0.1mm layer height. There is a 15% infill and 3 perimeters. Once again, no issues with adhesion to the blue painter's tape. This time I did use the heat bed. The heat was set to 60 degrees Celsius. The heat of the filament, I found 220 degrees worked for me with my printer setup, and also I had the dual fans blowing on either side of this part to keep the PLA plastic from curling at such a fine resolution. And once again, the PolyMakr PLA in color orange had no issues with uniformity. The color is the same from top to bottom, and all the detail has come out in this piece absolutely fine. I'm really happy with the quality of this filament. It seems to have no issues printing at these superfine resolutions and producing a really nice finish. So another successful print. Here we have Marvin and the Buddha frog printed with the PolyMakr PLA in white. Just like the PolyMakr in orange, Marvin has been printed without an issue at 0.1mm layer height with all the detail present. No problems with retraction, of course, and the color white is actually quite nice. It's a matte finish. It doesn't have like a glossy, shiny finish to it, and is once again quite uniform with the color white. And I haven't printed with white before. It's always been like a light grey or some other color, so it's quite refreshing to have a neutral color to print with. With the Buddha frog over here, this has been scaled down to about 65%. There are 3 perimeters and it has a 20% infill. No problems with adhesion to the blue painter's tape. This part was printed with the heat bed turned on at 60 degrees Celsius. Once again, the filament seemed to like 220 degrees to print with. And yeah, this Buddha frog has come up absolutely beautifully. I really like this color white, actually having that matte finish to it. It really brings out all the details to this part, and yeah, it seems to like printing at such a fine resolution, such as 0.1mm. And I'm really looking forward to going finer with this filament, because it doesn't seem to have an issue printing at this resolution. Marvin once again, this time printed in the Poly Plus PLA in the color blue. Unlike the PolyMakr PLA, the finish of this plastic has a glossiness to it, as opposed to having a matte finish that the PolyMakr stuff has, which is quite nice actually, especially in this color. Being quite a dark blue, having that gloss finish really makes it look like a quality piece. One thing I did note with this Marvin, and all the Marvins were printed at exactly the same speed and resolution of 0.1mm layer height, was I'm seeing just a little bit of curling on the plastic on Marvin's right hand side of his eye there, and also at the rear here there is also a little bit of curling of the plastic there as well. So with printing with the Poly Plus PLA, I think I'll either have to turn down the print speed or turn up the fans that are blowing on the part as it prints. But besides that, it is once again an absolute beautiful finish. There is all the detail has come out just as well as the PolyMakr stuff. No issues with retraction with this plastic, and another successful print. And finally, we have the cute Octopus says hello in Poly Plus PLA. Once again, no problems with adhesion with Poly Plus. It stuck to the blue painter's tape without an issue. I was using the heat bed with this part at 60 degrees Celsius, and the filament was printing at 220 degrees. The Octopus was scaled down to about 60%. It was printed with 3 perimeters and about a 25% infill. And another successful piece. This has come up absolutely beautifully, and at 0.1mm layer height, with the detail that you can start to see at 0.1, you can even see some of the like the polygons from the actual STL piece being printed onto the surface of this part. And yeah, this Poly Plus in this dark but glossy blue once again looks really, really nice. So I'm really happy with this filament. It seems to accept any piece that you throw at it, and also any resolution. No issues with retraction here as well between his tentacle here and the main body. There was no stringing occurring between there, and yeah, printing with the fans at both sides, and I wasn't getting any of the plastic flaking like I was getting with the Marvin. So I guess the print speed that I chose with this seemed to be perfectly fine. There you have it. Thanks to PolyMakr for sending me this filament to review. Compared to some of the no-name cheap Chinese stuff I've used in the parts, it was quite refreshing to be able to print these objects first go and get the level of quality that you can see in front of you here. I haven't had to waste any of the plastic on failed prints because of hissing or popping that I've had with other cheap Chinese filament. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.